Okay, so let us look at question 2, which is on photosynthesis. Okay, so they're saying photosynthesis is the process through which plants make their own food using sunlight. Okay, photosynthesis has light-dependent reactions and dark-dependent what? Reactions. Okay, so now the question comes, they're saying, what are the similarities and differences between the cyclic and non-cyclic phosphorylation? Okay, right, so you can see that on the similarities here, they have indicated that 3 marks, and then the differences they have indicated at 7 marks. Okay, so meaning on the similarities, you have to give 3 of them, and then on the differences, you also have to give what? The 3 of them. Okay, so let's look at it. Okay, so we first want to state the similarities between the cyclic and the non-cyclic what? Phosphorylation. Okay, so let's state them. So I've outlined them here, so we'll be going them step by step. Okay, so when we talk about the similarities between these 2 processes, okay, the cyclic and the non-cyclic gas phosphorylation, okay, the first similarity that we should know is that both processes, they occur in the diacarinoid membranes of the what? Chloroplast. Okay, they both occur in those areas. Okay, and then number 2 similarity is that both involve the use of light energy to generate what? ATP. And then the third similarity is that both involve the electron transport chain. Okay, so this is just a chain that will make it easier for the what? For the electrons to move like that. Okay, so these here are the 3 similarities between the cyclic and the non-cyclic what? Phosphorylation. Okay. All right, and then we look at the differences. So the differences, I've put them in the table here. Okay, so here I wrote the feature that is different. Then here is the cyclic, and then here is the non-cyclic. Okay, so in regards with the electron path, okay, in the cyclic phosphorylation, the electrons return to the photosystem 1. Okay, so remember in this cyclic phosphorylation, okay, the electrons get excited from the photosystem 1, right? Then they go all the way into the electron transport chain. They synthesize ATP there, and then they come back to the photosystem 1 or the PS1 system. Okay, so these electrons that will be excited, they return to the photosystem 1. Okay, and then when you go and look at the non-cyclic phosphorylation, okay, the electrons that pass from the PS2 to the PS1 and are finally accepted by the what? By the NADP+. Okay, so these ones here do not return to the PS1. Okay, and then in terms of the product produced, in the cyclic, we have only ATP that is produced. And then in the non-cyclic, we have 3 products. We have ATP, we have NADPH, and we also have what? Oxygen. Okay, and then the source of electrons, okay, the source of electrons in the cyclic, it uses the electrons from the PS1, okay, and then in the non-cyclic, the electrons are replenished by photolysis, by the photolysis of what? Water. So when water is broken down using light, that's where the electrons that will be used in the non-cyclic phosphorylation come from. Okay, and then in terms of the oxygen release, this cyclic does not involve any oxygen release. Okay, but in the non-cyclic, oxygen is released as a what? As a byproduct. Okay, and then in regards to the NADPH synthesis, the cyclic phosphorylation does not synthesize this guy, but this one here forms this guy. Okay, and then the general role of these 2 systems, the cyclic and the non-cyclic. Okay, so the cyclic provides additional ATP for the Calvin cycle. Okay, later on I'll explain what this Calvin cycle is. And then in the non-cyclic phosphorylation, okay, the role of this cycle, okay, is to drive both the ATP and the NADPH production, okay? But here is just what? The ATP, so that they can be used in the what? The Calvin cycle. But here it drives both the ATP and the NADPH production, okay? And then what about in terms of participation of the PS2 system? Okay, so in the cyclic phosphorylation, we only have the PS1. Okay, so the photosystem one is the one that works in the cyclic phosphorylation, and then in the non-cyclic we have both of them. Okay, so both of them will participate. The PS2 and the PS1 will both participate in the what? Non-cyclic phosphorylation. Okay, so those are the differences. And then we move to the other question here. They're saying, what are the two products of light reactions that are used in the dark reactions? Okay, so understand the question. What are the two products of the light reactions that are used in the dark reactions? Okay, so these products that we are talking about come from the light reactions, and then they go on to be used in the dark reaction. So what are the two products? Okay, so you should always know that the two products are just ATP and what? NADPH. Okay, so the ATP provides energy for the Calvin cycle, and then the NADPH here provides the reducing power for the synthesis of what? Glucose. Okay. All right, so that's those are the two products. So these products are produced in the light reactions, but they are used in the what? In the dark reactions. Okay, and then number 3 here, they're saying, with the aid of a diagram, explain what happens in the cyclic phosphorylation. Okay, and then you can see 8 marks. So it means you have to draw a diagram, okay, and then you have to explain that diagram. Okay, so I'll try to explain it. So I'll show you a diagram here, and then I'll be explaining. Okay, so this is in short what happens in the cyclic photophosphorylation. Okay, so this is what happens in the cyclic photophosphorylation. Okay, so now let's begin to explain this. Okay, so the first step, okay, in this cycle is the light absorption by the PS1. Okay, the PS1 is just the photosystem 1 system. So that PS1 is found in this chlorophyll that you can see here. So inside here, we have the PS1. Okay, so that system will absorb this light that you can see here. So this light will be absorbed by that PS1 system that is inside here. Okay, and then once that PS1 has absorbed that light, okay, what happens? Once it absorbs that light is that the electrons here get excited. Okay, so you can see excited. I was using an arrow to point up there. So the electrons get excited. So you can see these electrons. They are excited from the PS1 after it has absorbed what? Light. Okay, so once they are excited, they go on to pass through what we call as the electron transport chain. Okay, so the electron transport chain consists of electron carriers, okay, and a path that where these electrons can pass through. Okay, so you can see I've drawn this path in, I don't know if this is red or pink, this path here. Okay, so these electrons will be carried in these electron carriers, and then they'll pass through that path. Okay, so the electrons will come to this electron carrier. Through this electron path, they will be passed on to another electron carrier, just like that, and that, until they return to the what? The chlorophyll, okay, or the PS1 system. Okay, so now as these electrons move through this electron transport chain, okay, as these electrons move through this electron transport chain, what happens? Okay, they release energy, okay, or we say energy is released. So as these electrons pass through this electron transport chain, energy is what? Released. Okay, so this energy, okay, this energy that is released, okay, drives the pumping of the protons into the thiocarbon lumen, okay, creating what we call as a proton gradient. Okay, so as these electrons are moving, they are releasing energy. That energy, okay, it will go and support the pumping of hydrogen ions. And then those hydrogen ions, remember those hydrogen ions are positives, right? Okay. So the pumping of these hydrogen ions causes what we call as a proton gradient. So we have more of the positive charges than we had before. Okay. And then because of this proton gradient that we have, okay, because of this proton gradient that we have, okay, the stroma, because remember we are in the chlorophyll, right? Okay, we're in the chlorophyll. So the stroma of the chlorophyll will try to push them back. Okay, we'll try to push them back, and they will use what we call as ATP synthase. Okay, so ATP synthase. Okay, so what does this ATP synthase do? It um, it allows for the ADP that we have here. This ADP, you've seen it, this one here. It allows this ADP, okay, to turn into ATP. How? By adding an extra what? Phosphate there. Okay, we add another phosphate there to the ADP, and then it becomes ATP. Okay, remember this is adenosine diphosphate, and then this one is adenosine triphosphate. So this ATP synthase will add an addition of phosphorus to this, and then ATP will be produced. Okay, so this whole process of producing this ATP is happening as these electrons are moving in this electron transport chain going back to the PS1 system. Okay, so this is a little illustration of what happens in the what? Cyclic photophosphorylation. Okay, so I've also written down the steps here. You can easily pass through them. Okay, so here I was just summarizing. I said the cyclic phosphorylation electrons from the PS1 are excited by light. Okay, and then they pass through the electron transport chain. Okay, and then in that electron transport chain, these electrons do not reduce this NADP plus. Okay, instead, as they are traveling in that electron chain, they release energy, and that energy causes about a what? The proton gradient. Okay, and then this proton gradient makes it possible, okay, for the ATP synthase to add an extra phosphate to the ADP. Okay, and once you add an extra phosphate to the ADP, it produces what? ATP. Okay, so this is just a summary, but I've shown you the diagram that you can use. So you can master this diagram. Okay, this question is almost in any exam. Okay, so master it. Okay, so if they don't ask you about cyclic, they'll ask you about non-cyclic. Okay, so it's very important for you to know the cyclic and the non-cyclic, both of them. Okay, so also I'll share the diagram for the non-cyclic in the group. So make sure you pass through it. Okay, so we are done with question 2. Let's go to question 3. Okay, so question 3 is mostly about the lab that you guys do, okay, in a certain semester. So those labs are very important, so you must be attending them. Okay, I think let me, okay,